Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this image. So photographing glass can be a little problematic. So I'm going to show you some tips and techniques that I use to give you a reasonable result. Okay, so let's have a look at what I've got set up so far. So starting at the back and working forwards, I have this background paper on a roll, and this is a good 2 meters away from our subject, which I've placed on this piece of black perspex on this table, which will be this martini glass. And in the finished picture you saw that there's some water in it and so on, and I'll show you how all that is achieved. So coming a bit further forwards, I have my camera. I have a 24-70 zoom lens on this, and this is tethered into CaptureOne Software. Okay, so the first job, as usual, is just to take a blank frame with no flash, just to see what contamination we're getting from the house lights. I haven't set anything up on the camera yet. We'll just see how it goes. So we can see from this there are a few reflections in the glass from the house lights, and this is at f8. If I were to drop this down to the minimum for this lens, which is 2.8, and we do another test, yes, there we go, that's making those a bit more prominent. This is one of the problems that you get with highly reflective subjects like glass. It will pick up absolutely everything which is around it. So you do have to be careful. I mean, the obvious thing to do here is when you actually take the proper picture, if you like, you just turn the house lights out and rely on the modelling lights, if you have them, on the flash units. Establishing that we have a small amount of contamination, but nothing too serious at a working aperture, let me just reset that. I'll just take that back to an arbitrary f8. We'll just do another test just for good measure. There we go. We can still see these little highlights turning up. So that's just something to bear in mind as we carry on with this photo shoot. Right, so the first thing that I would do is set up some form of lighting on the background here. And for that I'm going to use a Profoto B2, but you could use just a small flash. Physically it needs to be quite small because we're going to put it down here at the back. Okay, so we'll just pop this down here like this. There we are. So this has a separate head and pack. I'll just turn the pack on. There we go. So the idea is that this will give a ball of light around here somewhere, which will graduate off to each side. Okay, so let's pop a flash trigger on the camera. Like that. Turn that on. And we'll give that a bit of a test. So this is our first test image, and you can see that starting off the lens is set possibly a little too wide, and the graduation on the background is possibly a little too bright. But you should be able to see that this dark edge on the glass here and down the stem, this is formed from the illumination of the background. So if I just adjust the composition a little. Okay, so having recomposed the shot, we'll give that another go. Now in this test image, you can see that we still have this highlight, which is just along here where I'm pointing out with the mouse, from the house lights. And overall, I think the camera is ever so slightly too high because we're looking slightly down on it. I want a completely flat rim here. So we just need to adjust the height a little. Again, check it through the viewfinder. There. Something like that. Okay. That's much better. Yeah, so you can see from this, that's what we had before. The rim's a bit separated. That's what we've got now. Okay, so far so good. I think the background needs to be turned down a little, but we'll come to that a bit later. The next thing I want to do is set a light to give me a highlight in the glass. Now with this you do have to be quite careful because if you just use a huge softbox you'll end up with a huge highlight in the glass, which isn't really what you want. So I'm going to use a strip box and I'm going to place it on this side about here somewhere. So I'll just rig that now. So we'll just pop this softbox in here. This is a 1 foot by 4 foot softbox. And that is attached to this Profoto head, which is running off this Pro 10 pack on the floor. And we'll just turn that on. There we go. To start with, I'll set this on an arbitrary energy level of 5. Okay, and we'll just do a bit of a test. So in this image you should be able to see that we now have this highlight on the glass and a few other highlights, secondary ones, and one going up the stem. So that's really what I wanted from that light. The other thing that this light will do is illuminate the water. You won't get a great deal of illumination from the background in the water, so we'll address that as we go on. So with those two things set, what I think might be an idea would be just to put a small amount of water in here, just to start the image off, as it were. Okay, and one of the other things that if you're doing any of this sort of work becomes very useful as an accessory is, of course, a towel. So we'll just put a small amount of water in the glass, and just to add a little interest, I'll just add an olive on a stick, like so. We'll just see what that looks like for composition. Yeah, not bad. Let's give that a bit of a test. There we are. Now we've actually just picked up a small blob of water on the side of the glass there. That needs cleaning off before we go much further. Now a lot of this type of photography is to do with detail. So it pays to make sure that you keep everything as clean as you can. So that's why I'm wearing these gloves. And I'm just going to very carefully get rid of these small imperfections. I'll just check it in the viewfinder. Okay, so that looks fine. I think we need to turn down the illumination on the background by about a stop at least. So let's just do that. There we are, that's gone down a bit, that's okay. The other thing I want to do is add a little colour to it. Something that will complement the tiny amount of colour that we've got at the front. So in order to do that, I'm just going to use one of these colour correction gels, which I'm just going to add to the front of the light like this. There we go. Now that will take some of the energy out, so we'll just have a little look and see how it's coming along. There we go. That's not bad at all, actually. Okay, so now what we're looking for at this stage is what's referred to as a blank plate. That is something where we can use later on in post-production in conjunction with the water splashes, which I'm going to add in a little time. But obviously, once we start playing with water with this, we're going to make a mess. So you don't want to be resetting it every single time. So what we will do is take a couple of images, just so that we know for certain we have that blank plate, which we can then use in the post-production process. So we'll just check everything is absolutely fine with that. I'll start by just checking the focus point on the screen here. If I just zoom in. Yeah, that's looking pretty sharp to me. The back edge of the glass isn't sharp, but I'm not particularly bothered about that. But the rest of it is looking okay. Right. Except, as I said earlier, we do have that contamination, which is this line here on the image. So what I'm going to do is I'll just turn on the modeling light on this flash and turn out the house lights to grab our blank plate. And we'll just grab an image. There we go. You should be able to see now that the reflection that we had, this one here, has now disappeared. And it looks a bit cleaner, which is nice. So now it just remains to add some water splash to this. So I'll get some water and we'll give it a go. Okay, this part of the process is incredibly hit and miss. But you actually need a very small amount of water. So I'm just going to use a tiny amount to start with. And just give that a bit of a splash. There we are. That's our first one. So you just carry on doing this until you get something that you want. Okay, so with those captured, I'll just turn the house lights back on and we'll go into Photoshop to do the post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and these are the 3 images that I've picked. So this is our clean slate, so that's the point that we're going to start at, and then we're going to use elements from this one and possibly that one, or just that one on its own. Haven't quite decided yet. So with this selected, I'm just going to copy that one and make it as a layer on top of this one, like so. Now, just to check that these are lined up properly, I'll just take the opacity down to about 40-odd%, 50%. And you can see that they're actually not lined up. If I zoom in, it makes it a bit more obvious. So then, by selecting the Move tool, I can then just move that image until it is precisely lined up with the one that's underneath it, like that. Okay. So now I'll go back to full opacity. And we'll zoom back out a bit. There we go. So that's our clean plate. And that's the image of the splash. Now you can see that from this point in the capture process, we'd actually made quite a large mess on the bottom here, and there's dribbles down the stem and all sorts of things. Which is why we have our clean plate. So, if I add a inverse mask, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and add a mask like that. Then anything that I paint in white will reveal that layer. So with white selected, I'll grab a paintbrush, make it a bit bigger and a bit softer. A bit more, something like that. And then wherever I paint with this, you can see that we're getting the splash. So I'll add a few of those. That. And then we'll add the glass. So that's starting to get there. There's a few of these that are a bit out of focus and I don't really want, so I'll just swap over to black, reduce the size, increase the hardness so I can get in quite close, and we can just paint out the ones we don't want. There we go. I'll get rid of those as well up there. One there as well. And these bits on the outside of the glass I don't think are quite necessary, so we'll get rid of those. In fact, I'll get rid of all of that side. There we are. Okay, so that's the beginnings. Now, if I have a look at this splash, I've got some interesting bits that are on this side, which I might want to use. So again, I will select all, edit, copy, go back to my original, go edit, paste. Now I'm going to turn off the other layer and just again use about 50% just to make sure that this is lined up. So again, using the move tool, maybe zoom in a little just to make sure. And just line that up quite nicely. There we go. I'm just using the move keys on the keyboard just to get that in line. There we are. Okay. So we'll just zoom out a little. Change the opacity back to 100%. Turn the other layer on. And again, I'm just going to add a inverse mask, like so. Then I can choose which bits that I want. So anything that I paint in white will show. So again, we'll just increase the size a bit and make that quite soft. There we go. So I'm going to start from around about here. Like this. Add a bit of interest. There we go. In fact, I'm going to go all the way across here and bring in this little blob that came out the side and the bit that went down the side of the glass like that. There we are. Okay, now this area just here, I haven't done that particularly well, so what I can do is black with that. I can just bring that stem back in again, just like that. You do really have quite a large amount of control with this sort of thing, but I think for now I'm going to leave it at that. So if I were to just zoom out a little, like so, yes, quite a pleasing image. I think I'll go for a crop, set to square, which is okay. I'll just use the straighten tool just to straighten it up a little. I'm just going to use the horizon line like that. Bring these edges in a bit. Something like that, I think. Maybe take that up a bit. Like so. And click on OK. And there we go. Well, I think that's quite a result, quite a pleasing little image. That's my idea of a water splash in a glass. If you like seeing these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.